everyone, this is Shruti here. Today we are going to discuss two topics which go hand in hand in the digital world: data protection and threat modeling. Now, data protection means it is ensuring the sensitive information is handled responsibly, while threat modeling means it helps us think ahead about risk and how attackers might exploit the weaknesses. Together, they form the backbone of a secure and privacy respecting system. Now, before we jump into the topic, what is a data protection? Um, Data protection is collecting the sensitive and personal information and keeping it private, keeping it accurate, and keeping it available. So, we all have heard about the CIA triad, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. Yes. Why data protection is required? Data protection is it's a sensitive data, like companies or organization when they collect the data for a customer. It can be employee files, payment details, medical history, certain other sensitive information. Now, if this information gets leaked or stolen, then what could possibly go wrong? For an individual, it could be an identity theft, which could happen, financial loss, or violation of privacy could happen. Now, for a company, it could mean reputational damage, um, maybe as in regulatory fines could be put across, or the loss of customer trust could happen over here. That is why we need the data protection laws. Now, there are six privacy or principles for data protection as per GDPR and the global laws that have been applied. First one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. That means telling people how their data is going to be used. The second one is purpose limitation, why the data is being collected for a specific reason. Data minimization, so only the specific amount of data which is being collected. Accuracy, keeping the data up to date once it is collected. Then storage limitations, so do not keep the data forever. Wherever it is required to be deleted, delete it, or wherever it can be archived, archive it. Now, integrity and confidentiality, protect it with security measures once the data has been collected. Okay. Jumping to now, what is a threat modeling? Now, why do we need to protect the data? How do we figure out where the risk is coming from? Now, this is where your threat modeling comes into the picture. Okay, so what is a threat modeling? It is basically you're proactively thinking like an attacker, what could possibly go wrong with the data. So, what are we basically protecting? Data. Whom are we protecting it from? What might attack, or what defenses do we need? Okay, so I, threat modeling has 5 steps. Okay, the first one is identifying the assets. So basically, what is valuable? First, you are identifying that. Then mapping out the system. So you're drawing the system to understand where the data is coming from, where it is stored, who all are accessing it. So you're basically understanding the flow of the data. The third one would be you're identifying now the threats related to the data. So, what could possibly go wrong? Where could the data be attacked? Could it be attacked in a transit? Yes, if it is a weak password, it could be attacked in a transit. Now, analyzing the risk. So, how likely it is going to happen and what damage it is going to cause. The last step would be mitigating it. So, mitigating the threat would be putting the controls in the place for this attacks to not to happen. That is your threat modeling. So the threat modeling category across the industries are multiple which have come across. The, the major one which has been used so far is Stride across. Now let's find out how many few examples of attacks which have happened through, like spoofing identity, pretending to be somebody else. So basically, what happens over here, the attacker phishing emails, they trick users to giving away their login credentials by pretending to be somebody else. Attacker logging in with stolen username and password. Now caller id spoofing in phone calls, which phone scams which would happen. Other kind of attacks would be tampering of data, altering, deleting, or corrupting of data. SQL injection modifying a database record could happen. Now, changing values in an online transaction could possibly happen by an attacker. Ransomware encrypting files. Okay. Denial of services, DOS. Now, making the systems unavailable. Distributed denial of service attacks on a website, like for flooding an email server with spams could happen, or malicious script consuming 100% of system resources could happen over here. So there are multiple types of attacks which could happen by an attacker. It is it can never be 0% where we could stop all the attacks, but yes, we could always ensure that the controls are put into place so that the attacks are minimized. Okay. Now, how data protection and threat modeling can work together. So how a DPO and or uses his principles, and the threat modeling uses those methods to bring it on the same plate. So data protection gives us principles and rules, whereas threat modeling gives us practical methods to apply those rules. Now, if I take it examples, let's see, one of the examples of principle for data protection is minimization. So data minimization, that is collecting only the data which is required. In the threat modeling, let's say I have identified in my DFD, that is data flow diagram, that personal unnecessary personal data is being collected. For example, it's a healthcare app. A huge amount of data is being getting collected for a full medical details are being collected, where only an allergy detail has to be collected for that person. So what controls I can put? Minimize the data fields, or ensure that only the required amount of data is being collected over here. The second principle of data protection is integrity and accuracy. So, what is integrity and accuracy? Keeping the data accurate once it has been collected. Now, as per threat modeling, it has been identified that it could be tampered. Now, example, banking system. Threat model that money transfer values could be altered by a SQL injection. So, what controls can be put across? Cryptographic integrity checks can be put, input validations can be put across over here. So, if I take one more examples of principle is availability, ensuring the data and the system are available or accessible whenever needed, okay, by the specific people. Now, as per threat modeling, denial of services has been identified. Now, what is denial of services? For example, let's say it is an e-commerce site, shows attackers could flood login requests, flooding. So basically, they are flooding the login request. So how we can mitigate this with the control? Rate limiting and DDoS repetition protection can be put across. Yes. Now, one last example of a principle would be list least privileges, that is access control. So, user only has access to specific data. Now, not everybody should have access to everything, right? Now, in a threat modeling, elevation of privilege threat has been identified. So, for example, an intern has got an admin right access because of a weak access control. What could possibly go wrong over here? Multiple things could go wrong because he has admin right access over there. So, how we could mitigate this? By giving role based access, or maybe by privileged audits or privileged accounts, which could be done. So it's basically like this. Data protection sets the destination, privacy, compliance, and security, whereas threat modeling helps to design the map to get over there. It is spotting the potholes, shortcuts, roadblocks before we even start the journey. Okay. If I take a real life example very quickly, would be identifying the medical, as in patient records are being collected. prescriptions, billing details, medical histories are being collected. So, what could be the threat for this data? It could be hackers stealing the records, ransomware locking the systems could happen, or insiders could be misusing the data. Now, as per threat modeling, medical data which is in transit could be intercepted, spotting that the vulnerabilities are unpatched on a server, recognizing that employees are sharing same logins. How a control can be put? So, encrypt the data, patient's data, which is in transit, enforce unique logins in MFA, regular patches to the system, then train the staff in privacy awareness. So, this particular combined approach within the compliance with laws of GDPR and HEPA and with threat modeling, we could stay resilient against the real world attackers. So, so the basic key takeaway would be data protection is about safeguarding information according to the principles of laws, ethics, and security, whereas threat modeling is about thinking like an attacker and applying the right defenses even before the attack happens. So together they can ensure that the system is compliant and resilient. So security and privacy aren't just one time thing which could happen. It is an ongoing practice which could go on. So the more we integrate threat modeling in an everyday projects, the stronger our data protection can become, is what I believe. Thank you for listening.